Hey, good evening. Very honored to be asked to speak tonight, and I confessed to a couple of friends that I was nervous about speaking tonight. This is such a serious and difficult subject to discuss, and I really wanted to do it justice. And I realized that I can approach this the same way I approach counseling. What I approach with my clients is when there's a tragedy, we try to find the meaning of it. What is the meaning that we can take from this so that we can move forward and grow? So that's what I intend to do tonight when I speak with you. So one of the reasons that finding meaning, that I feel like the best way I can do that is that we need to be able to do just like the other speakers said, to remember those who have passed, and as best as we can, try to determine what would have been their dying wish. And I can only guess that it would have been to create a safer world for those who are transgender. And so, with that being said, one of the ways I think I could best honor that tonight is I will be quoting individuals who are transgender. I'm going to be using their words to speak to you as much as I can, so I can give them the floor as much as possible. So, although the names that are being read tonight, they were victims of anti-transgender violence, and they're from all around the world, I am going to start off with a story that's closer to home, right here in Colorado Springs. So, you can hear a voice from this community. I'm going to tell you a little bit about someone named Finn. Some of you may have known him. You might have known him by the name August or Blake. Finn was a trans man, and he died by suicide in June of this year. His death impacted me and many others. So I feel I have a unique opportunity tonight for me to share with you some of Finn's thoughts. And the reason I'm able to share that with you is thanks to his best friend and his most trusted person in life, Corey. Corey shared with me, and he gave me permission to share with you what some of Finn's dying wishes were. Corey told me Finn wanted his life and death used as a tool for growth and progress. The first thing that he mentions is that Finn had a passion that there needs to be more visibility for trans people, especially people who identify as gender fluid, gender queer, asexual, or non-white, in other words, minorities within a minority group. He was especially concerned with and he was very deeply affected by the number of trans youth who died by suicide and how positive visibility can make a really big difference in the lives of those youth. The second issue that was important to Finn, improving mental health care, and especially for low-income and trans and non-binary people. This was his strongest passion and ultimately what led to his death. Finn struggled regularly with our local mental health facilities. First of all, even being able to get into the facility in the first place, and once he was there, being misgendered and even verbally abused. And sadly, I've heard this from many other local people in this community who are transgender, that this is the experience they've had in our local mental health facilities. And so basically this exacerbated the mental health concerns Finn already had and that he was struggling with. The third and final issue that Finn was wanting to know about is the controversial yet highly relevant issue of the legislation of sex work between consenting adults. Finn was passionate about bringing much needed attention to this issue. I keep a copy of the program from Finn's funeral in my office, partially so that if I haven't seen him for a while and I can look at some photos of him. The program also reminds me of a couple other things. The name on the program is his birth name, not the name that he went by. The only time I heard his name used during the entire funeral service was when Corey went up and spoke about him. There's also at least one picture I don't think Finn would have wanted shared in the program itself. And so this is my way of remembering Finn, and I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to get to know him and hear what was important to him. So at this point, we're going to zoom back a bit. We're going to talk about all the names that we're going to be hearing tonight from across the world. And like what was mentioned earlier, something significant happened in the United States this year. A record high of 21 lives lost in acts of anti-transgender violence. And this was according to the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs. And keep in mind, this number is absolutely inaccurate. There's many violent deaths of those who are transgender that weren't reported and lost due to misgendering. So this number is higher. But of the 21 reported deaths, 19 of these individuals were women of color. The questions we have to ask ourselves, why such an increase? Why so many women of color? And what can be done? So first, let's hear from the voice of Jali Shavers. Jali is an organizer at an LGBTQ youth group in New Orleans. And Jali said, overall, the epidemic that is happening in the country right now absolutely has fueled us in being louder and more visible. In general, if you look at history, a lot of times when there's positive moves for historically marginalized groups, there also tends to be a backlash. Echoing this theory, former executive director of the Transgender Law Center, Mason Davis, said, right now we are experiencing a Dickinsonian time, where it's the best of times and it's the worst of times, all at once. He points out that there's an increase in public awareness, there's progress being made towards trans legal rights, and yet there's still extremely high rates of unemployment, poverty, and violence that continue. And in a sad way, this makes complete sense based on the patterns that we have seen of other civil rights movements in the past. It makes it clear that we're still in the early stages of this one. In regards to the number of young transgender women of color who made up the numbers, Mara Kiesling of the National Center for Transgender Equality said that trans women of color are more susceptible to violence because they are marginalized economically and educationally. So basically what we're talking about is there's an intersection of transphobia, sexism, and racism all at once going on for these women. So the general consensus is that there's more investigation that's needed to figure out why this is happening so that steps can be taken to change this. So on a national level, first of all, over the past couple of months, we've heard from politicians such as Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, Senator Al Franken, calling this specifically a national crisis. Just announced this Tuesday, which is good timing, there's a task force that's been dedicated to issues of transgender equality, and also Congress's first ever forum on violence against transgender people. So yes, this is being noticed, and yes, action is being taken. But the hard truth is that this will take time. It might even take a couple of generations to get through this. But every cultural shift must start somewhere. The reason it's going to take time is because there are root causes of this issue that are deeply embedded on a deeper level. They're psychological, they're cultural, they're systemic. Specifically talking about the areas mentioned earlier, transphobia, sexism, racism. The way I see it, I think one of the biggest parts of transphobia is that it results from people seeing people who are transgender as challenging an already established understanding about gender. So basically, there's people out there who, no matter what they've been taught about gender, whatever they've been believing about it, they cannot believe that maybe it's not true. Maybe this is inaccurate. Maybe there's more to this than we ever even knew. In fact, there's a lot of people that are very threatened by this idea. So much so that it leads to bigotry, discrimination, and violence. Concerning sexism, and specifically in this case, misogyny, I want to quote Julia Serrano from her book Whipping Girl. Misogyny is the tendency to dismiss and deride femaleness and femininity. So why is this even done? She says, femaleness and femininity cast a shadow of doubt over the supposed supremacy of maleness and masculinity. So this is the deeper issue that many people have with trans women, even if they don't know it. And this affects men as well. Men are unable to express any sort of femaleness or femininity without it being an issue. So the fear of the feminine is an issue that touches everyone. And in this case, very much so for the individuals that we're remembering tonight. And thirdly, racism. And as much progress as we have made as a nation, it has become clear here of late that there's so much work left to be done. So even though there is a national call that has been started to really get to the bottom of this, what can we do as individuals? This is kind of a classic point in this kind of talk on a night like tonight, and I'm going to reiterate the same things that everybody else already has said tonight. What we can do as individuals, first of all, those of you out there who would consider yourself allies, make sure being an ally is not just a noun, but it's also a verb. Be active in your allyship. And like Dottie mentioned, learn as much as you can about this. Besides just general knowledge, get to know specific transgender people and their individual stories, and then share that knowledge and educate others. And you can do this however you're comfortable with. You can share different things through social media, you can have one-on-one conversations with people, or you can really stick your neck out and step up for somebody who you see as being treated wrongly. Make sure you let it be known to people who are transgender that you are supportive. If this is somebody at your workplace, in your family, even somebody that you see online, and one comment can really let a lot of people know that you are in their corner. And it's really important that people remember that there's a lot of us out there who are in your corner. If you're transgender, what can you do? Like it was already mentioned earlier, pretty much, even though it might sound trite, be you. And that really is the number one thing you can do. Basically, you do have the right to not to have to be a spokesperson or an educator, and every person who wants to learn more about what it's like to be transgender wants to come to you and ask you questions. You have a right to privacy. You have the right to live your normal life. For those of you who enjoy being active and visible, by all means do so, and do it as often as you can. The other thing I want to mention is that just remember that within the community itself, everybody's experience is equally valid. So remember, there's no right or wrong answers to go about being transgender or transitioning or anything like that. Everyone's going to have a different story, as well as having a different way to express it. Some people will be more visible, some people choose not to be, and that's okay. Also, make sure you seek out support, whether it's in person, whether it's online, and make sure you also give your support to one another when you can. And like I said before, don't forget there are many, many people out there fighting for this to become a safer world for you. So I'm going to close. And I'm going to close with a quote from a show that just opened this year on Broadway. And it's called Hamilton. And it's about Alexander Hamilton. And hopefully this isn't a spoiler, but he dies at the end. And there's a song that his wife sings, and basically she lives for another 50 years after he dies. And she carries his torch, and she talks to everybody that he knew to learn more about him. And she carries on with all the issues that were important to him. She follows through with them. And her quote was, she sang it, but I'm not going to sing it. But when you're gone, who remembers your name? Who keeps your flame? Who tells your story? And in honor of those who we remember tonight, we do and we will. Thank you for listening.